All right. This is the I think first thing I'm doing covering SE Ultimecia, the latest tournament. We're in 2024, though I'm recording this at the end of 2023, and I think something really interesting has happened. There are two games I thought were really fascinating. I've been using to check games what I briefly called the Professor bot, but the strongest bot I've built gives scores for every move available, right? And it gives more detailed scores than like win, tie, or loss. So in most positions, kind of the very best moves in a position, it will score. The numbers don't really matter here, but how it ended up, it will score kind of between 470 and 500 in most positions that aren't winning. If there's a winning move, it'll often score over 500. Um, and then like kind of normal moves are more in the like 430 to 460 range, and usually moves under 430 mean you're in quite a bit of danger. Anyway, it's you can take a move played and you can compare to the best move available in the position according to it. And rather than kind of say like, okay, you played a tie when there was a win, it can gradiate better than that in a way I think is useful. And what I want to say for that, the reason that's relevant here, is it thinks both of these games were fantastically played. This first game it thinks was not quite perfect, but very close. And the second game it thinks that we're going to look at was absolutely perfectly played. But both of these played at an absolutely top level from the winning player. And what we saw in both of them that drew my attention was not just these were really well played games, but that they both involved something a little different than every other game so far played this round, which is to say there are three types of starters: corner, center, side. And so far in the round, we've seen one side starter, and it led to a tie. And we've seen a bunch of corner starters. Some of them won, some of them tied, some of them lost. And we have seen two center starters, and both of them won. And both of them won in very convincing fashion. I think they were played really, really well. And we're going to take like a quick look at the games now. This first game is going to be just a fantastic game played by Sergio, and the second game maybe the Professor Bot thinks even better game played by Yevon. I would say both of these games are just great, and I really liked how they were done. I probably especially like this one because Sergio used the hand I wanted to see someone play, and specifically led off with 6-3, 6-3, and 5. And we can immediately see that how well the 5-1-5-6 or 5-6-5-1 type cards play off it. They already are really good on their kind of part of the board at plus walling sixes, but playing off the six or the threes here, they can potentially hit sevens, right? The 1-5-6-5, if it's in two, can grab sixes next to it, but it can also grab sevens next to it. But the 1-5-6-5 also now has more play in 4 or 6, where it can grab sevens facing down. Now, that's not going to be too relevant here because there aren't that many sevens in this specific game, but you could see why it would be relevant in some other matchups. I also think, well, we'll get to that with Sergio's next move, but he shows something that the hand can do quite nicely. Sachi captures from 6, which I think is a reasonable move, in that I believe this wasn't liked by the solver, but that's okay. Screw the solver. It kind of says, okay, I didn't have like some big corner that was particularly effective. You know, you have my 6-6 corners well covered. My 7 is always going to be capturable by you. Maybe there's a case for 7-4-4-1 in probably in 6 rather than 4, because then you have the recapture in 3 if needed. So maybe 7-4-4-1 and 6 is interesting. But being weak to the card in 5 means you have to be confident you have more combo play off the card in 5. Which you might. Maybe 7-4-4-1 and 6 made a little more sense. But I think the 1-5-5-6 did not have a ton of play in the hand. It has this plus wall in 2, but you have another card that can do that in Abomination, the 2-3-6-6. This seems a pretty reasonable move. But after Sergio's move, blue is almost lost. I think there is one saving move here. I don't remember what it was, but I remember the solver saying one tie. We're not going to spend time trying to find it. We're just going to say, why is Sergio's play so strong here? Part of it is any combo chain through 4, Sergio can combo from 1 or 7, right? 6-5-1-5 and 7, or 1-5-6-5 in 1. But the other thing is, his cards just sweep side to side. The only direction where there's a number he can't take is potentially that 7 up, but he's made the game a side to side game. The 7 up is never going to actually be relevant. He's never going to have to take it. and his 1565 and his 6515 just sweep the top and bottom. And his 5156 can do some pretty decent work as well. I would think that Sachi's only hope at a tie here is probably something that doesn't give the 5156 use, right? You want to try to keep that in Sergio's hand, but it's really hard to think like that because, like, say you went, I don't know, something in 9, right? Trying to say, okay, the 5156 can't land in 3 because I have a combo in 2. Some kind of thinking like that, right? Or you go in 3 thinking 5156 can't go in 9 because it doesn't have a capture there, and it also is weak to a Sane in 8, right? Something like that. And then Sergio can just put the 5156, say you go in 3, in 7. And the 6515 and 1565 are just fantastic sweepers here, really destroying anything below a 7. And we can go forward with the game. Sachi went in 1. My first instinct here would probably be 5156 in 9, just because it leaves my last 2 cards to sweep, but I don't think that's such a good idea, because it gives up the same in 8, and you don't maybe have that great a sweeper in 2. You never flip back 5 if needed. So Sergio played a winning and correct move. He played great. He uses his 6515, which is one of his sweepers, but his 5156 actually just is going to do sufficient work. The 6515 is safe, and the 5156 can clean up the bottom due to that 5 facing down in 6. At this point, I think Sachi realizes it's over and goes out in style. Nope, that was not the move he made. I clicked make AI move. I believe he went here. Sergio uses the 5156, and now the 1565 sweeps the top as well. So just a really nice example of kind of, I think someone once called this sort of a wheel hand. I think that was a name someone used way back in the day. There's hands where you have a center starter in 5, and the idea is you have setups, right? You have a card that goes in 1, and that sets you up to have one card that combos in both 2 and 4. And maybe there's a card you could put in 9. Maybe it's the same card, and then you have one card that combos in 6 and 8, right? And you build these hands around a 5 starter that have all this combo potential. But there's another type of 5 starter hand where you do it to control space, where you say, all the numbers, I can play off this to take whatever you do. And I think one thing that I really liked that Sergio did this game was he sort of transitioned from that kind of idea into, I just have these great sweepers. I see the game's going to be side to side, so I'm going to use in 4. I'm going to go in 4, make it as much side to side as I can, just make it these 2 side to side rows, and I'm going to use one of 5156 or 5651 because those are going to be my worst side-to-side sweepers, recognizing what's going to dominate the late game and just going from there. I really enjoyed this game. I thought it was a really cleanly won, nice game that really showed off what the hand could do in a kind of ideal way. So that's the first 5-starter game we're going to look at. And the second one was played by Yevon against Addy, and we also saw a 5-starter. And much like the last game, my professor bot thought this was the best move. And I think the professor is often a little more useful than the solver, because the solver looks at this and goes, you have 30 ties and 15 losses or whatever for your starter. And this is one of the 30 ties, good job. But it can't differentiate between those 30 ties. And the professor is sort of the just most powerful non-solver bot I've built, but that means because it has a lot of features in it because it doesn't have just pure solver power, it has to have a lot of inputs to be able to figure things out, and that means it can really granularly differentiate between moves and do a pretty good job of it. And it really likes this 5-starter, so I think it's worth taking a sec to look at it. And we see Addy going with a hand kind of similar to what Sergio did last game, except with 6/6s instead of some of the 6/5/5s, and 6/6/3/2 corners, specifically opposite ones. Now, Yevon is, I think, the first player to use 6/6s, multiple 6/6s. We saw Sergio use 1. Yevon uses 2, but neither of them 6/6/3/2s. Instead, he says the dangerous cards on this rule set are going to have 6s and they're going to have 7s. And these 6/6/2/2s are going to sweep the 6s. If there's sixes side to side, my 2-6-2-6 is going to dominate. If there's sixes up and down, my 6-2-6-2 is going to dominate. You're going to run 6-6-3-2s. I am going to control those. So I'm going to keep those in my hand to control that space. What if you run sevens? Okay, I got a plan for that. 4-7-4-1 can hit some sevens up and down. 4-3-4-7 can hit the sevens to the left. 4-7-4-1 can hit the sevens. 4-7-4-1 can hit the sevens to the left. 4-3-4-7 can hit the sevens to the right. So I have ability to capture both sixes and sevens with this hand. Also, the 4-1-4-7 can be set up by the 4-3-4-7 to pick off some sevens it wouldn't normally, because the 4-1 can play off fours facing up and down to grab sevens. And so 5-6-5-1 makes sense as the card to use first. I wonder if one other starter idea Yevon had in the hand was 4-7-4-1 and 4, with 5-6-5-1 as a potential recapturer that looks quite logical as a defensive side. But Yevon, and also Yevon has options to play like 2-6-2-6 and 4 as a defensive side. And one nice thing about that kind of starter is it's also an aggressive side, because if you start in 4, 4-3-4-7 controls any card in 1 or 7. And that seems to me somewhat in Yevon's style, but recently, and in Yevon's initial really good run in the Return of the Site, that was the kind of starter he was playing. In his recent really good run, he's been playing a lot more center starters. And that's what we're going to see here, where normally the concession, I think the way to think about this move, for me at least, is the cost of a center starter is that it just gives so much ability for the opponent to control the direction and the kind of space of the game, right? There's so many squares they could potentially play in, and you now don't get to interact with that square through 5, right? If they go in 1, you can't go in 5 with setups to reply. You already need to have those setups, right? If they go in a corner, you always have the start in a corner. You have the option to go in 5. But if 5 is occupied, you have much less way to interact with wherever they play. 5 is the most interactive square on the board, and you are removing it, which means wherever they start trying to set up, you have less ability to interact. And I think that can be a real cost, right? That can be a real problem and a real drawback and handicap of this kind of move. Addy chooses to play in 4, and we can already see Yevon is limited up and down, right? Addy is creating a difficulty for Yevon. Yevon goes 6-2-6-2 in 1 or 7. That's the only up-down power he has. We're trying to run him out of that up-down power. But the downside of this move is something we kind of saw last game, which is that Yevon's hand can sweep a side-to-side game. 2-6-2-6 is unstoppable going side to side. And so my instinct with Yevon's hand here would be to kind of do what Sergio did and go in 6. But I think actually Yevon makes an even better move. And I kind of think of this as the center attack. I made a video about this so long ago. But you see this very rarely, and it's nice to see it work. I think Scythe was really good at this. I think Scythe, some of his great run around the end of 2008, early 2009, was using stuff like this, and some of his play in the Return, though he wasn't playing as well or as seriously, also used this kind of move, is to say, I'm going to start in the center, and that's going to concede space. But wherever you go, there's 2 squares next to it that could potentially be safe. And my move, everywhere you go, has 2 out-facing sides. But you are guaranteed to create 2 squares, 1 and 7 in this case, but anywhere you go after my center starter, you create 2 half-safe already squares. And I'm just going to take one of those safeties. And because I dominate the side-to-side, I know you don't have that safety in response, right? If Addy goes 6-6-3-2 and 1 or something like that, Yevon has multiple ways to capture that. If Addy goes in 8, Yevon has multiple ways to capture that. And I believe, kind of similar to last game, I think that Solver said there's actually only 1 tie here already, despite the fact that Addy made a completely reasonable looking move in 4. But in the previous game, we saw Sergio exploit the side-to-side by locking the middle row entirely so that every interaction must be side-to-side. And here we see Yevon creating a different kind of side-to-side domination advantage, but it is a side-to-side domination nonetheless. Something I talked about, not for a long time, because I haven't talked about center starters for a long time, but with an unbalanced hand like Yevon's, if you're seeing that from Addy's point of view, going in 4 makes a lot of sense to say you have only one card that can fight this in 6-2-6-2. And in one sense, that's a really dangerous way to attack Yevon's hand. But in another, you're allowing the game to become side to side. And I think one of the conclusions we have to draw from these two games is when you see, and Sergio's hand was more balanced, it would have been harder to do this here, but when you see a hand like Yevon's that is so good side to side and weakish up down, the move that is immediately difficult for it up down, but makes the game side to side, might not be the best answer. And it might have been better to go in 2 or 8, which would be much easier for Yevon's hand to take, but would force the future interactions of the game into an up down setting where Yevon's hand wouldn't be as strong. So I think that might be a useful takeaway in dealing with this kind of thing. But that's not, I don't really want to focus on how to deal with center starters. I want to celebrate that we don't see that many center starters. And right now in round 1, we're seeing them and they are dominating. The players playing them, they are playing correct center starters and they are following them up well and they are winning forcefully. Addy, it's kind of unclear what to do here. I think a lot of players in these kind of panicky situations, like panicky meaning there's not something clear to do, right? Like to go in somewhere like 6, but that just makes it 2 side to side. If you go in like 3, then Yevon goes 6. It's 2 side to side, or has the option to. I think it's difficult to avoid now it being a really tough side to side game. My instinct would probably be go 6-6-3-2 and 1, where I kind of assume the main line would be, let's say 2-6-2-6 and 2. There's also 4-3-4-7, which I couldn't take back with 3-2-6-6 there, but I could maybe with 5-1-5-6. So if something captures in 2, let's say 4-3-4-7. So that makes it 5-5. I go 3-2-6-6. I go 5-1-5-6 and 3. I'm up 6-4, and they go 6-2-6-2 in 6, making it 5-5, and I lose at the end. 2-6-2-6 is too good a sweeper. So it's really easy to see how the kind of first lines you would look at here don't work. In both these games, if you find the tie, let me know. I'll check it. I don't want to spend forever looking for it now because that's not kind of the point of what we're talking about here. We're talking about how these centers worked. We're not finding the exact defense that could have held here. But if you do look at it for a bit and find it, let me know and we'll check and make sure you got it right. Because I think these are difficult defenses, and if you're looking for difficult defense practice, these might be good examples. Addy clearly decides 1 is not working and decides to go in 8. And Yevon just takes, but Yevon has to take correctly. And I think Yevon does a really nice piece of calculation here. There is use for both 2-6-2-6 and 4-3-4-7 to sweep here. 2-6-2-6 is the more kind of guaranteed sweeper, but 4-3-4-7 might be able to play off some synergies better. My first instinct would definitely be use the 4-3-4-7, but Yevon correctly plays the 2-6-2-6. And in the game continuation, we can see exactly why that was the correct option. Because in this key position, 4-3-4-7 is the perfect sweeper. It combos any card played. Now, sure, if 6-6-3-2 lands in 2, it plus walls it, but doesn't flip anything extra. But if 3-2-6-6 goes in 2, we have a plus. If 3-2-6-6 goes in 3, we have a plus. Really beautifully lines up. We also already threaten a plus in 2. I believe Addy gave the 9-1 here, which is the elegant way to go. And Yevon earns a really lovely victory. Really nice win for him in round 1 over a tough opponent. Addy doesn't play a ton of open events, but basically every event he's played in the past 6 months, he's been a really high-level player in open. This is a super impressive win. Again, the Professor bot thought Yevon played this game absolutely perfectly. I think it thinks this is either the first or second perfectly played game of round 1. I love this center attack with this move in 7. Again, If you want to see more of this kind of stuff, go find my center attack video. Uh, really precise move in 9. You have options here, right? You can consider the capture in 1. You can consider the Q in 3. There are two different plausible captures in 9. Occasionally there's stuff in 2 or 6, but usually it's 1, 3, or 9. And there was only one win here. And while I think 9 is probably the square you look at, uh, again, my instinct is to go 4, 3, 4, 7, and 9. And that doesn't mean that's what I'd play, but it means that is what I'd check first. And often when, you're 5 moves out, there's a lot of calculation to do. There's a bunch of possibly appealing moves. You could easily think, let's go in 3. I have an up-down sweeper for 6 and 9. I have a side-to-side sweeper in 1 and 2. Okay, maybe that's not so good because that can't flip the cards in, say, 8 very easily. My up-down sweeper doesn't flip the extra card. I'm just saying there's a whole lot you could look at, and this is the kind of position that is promising, but easy to not be precise in. And Yevon was very precise here, and the 4-3-4-7 just lands so well at the end. So these are two games I thought were just great games, utilizing center starters very effectively. I'm curious if we're going to see center starters have a sort of revival. Now, I'm not sure there's some innate reason they should, right? This may have been a rule set that just happened to work really well for them. These 2-6-2-6s in this game, the 6-5-1-5s, really played well around 5 being occupied and around having the game in the right directions and keeping the right cards to sweep the resulting endgames. And I'm not sure that will apply on other rule sets and other levels, but both these players have showed this working really well, and I'd have fun seeing it in future rounds if they kept trying starters like this. Really reminds me of Scythe, especially this one with the center attack. And also, I've said this before, but Yevon reinvents himself as a player more than any other player. Like, the way he played in the 2021 Xmas GB is just very different than how he's played since. And he played that one with a very particular style. And then he played a somewhat more conventional style with solid results in 2022. And then he had a really, really good 2023 where he got 0 Player of the Year votes, but he was the 3rd player nominated. So, I mean, he gets the bronze for 2023 Player of the Year. And he does so with a much more kind of 5 center kind of style, which was different than his very side focused. Like, you look at him each year: 2021, side starters; 2022, maybe a bunch more corner starters, a mix, but a little more cornery. 2023, suddenly we're center starters, right? Every year he comes with new kind of starter play. And I've never talked to him about it. I have no idea how intentional this is, but it's fun to see, and I thought this was just a fantastic game.